Does this look like I'm having a good time to you? I've always thought Dark Souls was an easy game. I mean, you just dodge the hits and hit back and that's it. So I was super excited when JK walked into my life saying I could spice up Dark Souls with a little bit of modding. What I didn't expect is that spice went from like, salt to Carolina Reaper. This is the Scorched contract mod, and here, every single boss kill grants a debuff to the player or otherwise makes the game harder. And as an idea, this is so cool to me. This was the first time I'd ever heard of this mod, so I went in without knowing anything and was so excited, but oh baby, I was not prepared. To my knowledge, it's only available on the Prepare to Die edition of the game, which I thankfully happened to own before Steam nuked it from orbit, but maybe that's a good thing. This mod needs to be contained. I wouldn't want to inflict this on anyone just enjoying the remaster. Real fast though, if you're interested in seeing this kind of content, consider subscribing because it helps the channel out way more than you know, and it lets me know that this is what y'all want to see so I can make more of it. Anyway, without further ado, Dark Souls, Prepare to Die, Scorched Contract. I decided to start as the Pyromancer because I honestly wasn't sure what to expect, but I figured having access to Pyromancy, aka Easy Mode, wasn't a bad idea. I took the Master Key and named her Chaos, which was just a spur-of-the-moment thing, but I would soon find out was a very accurate name for this run. The beginning of the Asylum plays out normally. I run by the Asylum demon, grab my weapons, politely remind Lemon that the DS2 two-shot video isn't going to edit itself, grab my red hot glove, and take on Thickums McRoundbottom. But already, Scorched Contract had its talons in me. At about 20% health remaining, the boss explodes, fully regenerating its health, and buffs its weapon with Dark, which, wrong game, but that's okay, we stand Dark Souls 2 here. The fight isn't really changed much. The Asylum Demon either has higher resistances or more health, or both I suppose, but his damage output doesn't seem to be altered and I didn't notice any new moves. So it's only a matter of time before he falls. Upon defeat, a massive darkness forms. Originally, I thought it was something to be interacted with, but upon doing so, nothing seemed to happen. But then suddenly Abyss Pursuers shot from it and assaulted my character. Naturally, I began panic rolling for my life, but there was no escaping them. I quickly learned, however, that this was not out to kill me, at least not directly. No, they were simply the messengers for the contract. I was given 2 pieces of parchment, the contract itself, wherein there are only 2 binding laws. 1, that in order to face Gwyn, Lord of Cinder, all other bosses must fall, and 2, that each boss will curse my existence with some form of debuff. The other document, the Purple Nullification Waiver, a way out, at any point it could be signed and I would be freed from this torment that is the contract. Surely though, it can't be that bad, right? Oh, how naive I was. Unaware of the vast darkness I was about to cross, I stepped into Firelink, my safe home away from home and leveled strength. Again, I wasn't really sure what to expect, but at present, the world of Lordvessel was unchanged. I was able to move as freely as I would any other time I had passed through this land. So I first decided to descend into the nearby catacombs. I'm not here to fight anything, instead I make my way down and slip past the worst placed enemy in the game, well, worst placed enemy in the game so far, grab the Eyes of Death and settle in for a nice nap. The Titanite Demon was determined to wake me, but mere moments before he sent me to the afterlife, which I guess would have been fitting as I was in a coffin, I was pushed down by some friendly skeletons. I then bowed to Nito and pledged my allegiance to him, awarding me the Gravelord's sword. This is a very powerful early game weapon. Unfortunately, I don't possess the power nor dexterity to wield it yet. What I did have, however, was the power to manipulate space and time, apparently. For whatever reason, when I used the soul for my quick bar, it didn't disappear. While I could, and in hindsight should, have just stood here and gotten a million souls this way, my hubris denied me such luxuries and I threw myself from the cliff. Similarly, it would seem I had an infinite amount of heals. I had hoped in vain that this was actually just from the mod. Perhaps standing near a bonfire gives you an unlimited amount of heals for some ominous reason, but it's not, it's just a glitch and one quit out fixes it. In the Undead Burg, I stopped to buy the Reinforced Club, another great early game weapon, then put it to use immediately by putting down the Undead Merchant for the Residence Key, which I then used to get the gold pine resin in the nearby chest. Okay, this time I used my Lloyd's talismans to sleep the mimic before stealing its treasure. I was a bit afraid that the crystal lizard might have been replaced with an explosive barrel or something, but it wasn't. Still, I now had a sense of despair that the most mundane things were going to be changed. Either way, I had no choice but to press on, so I charged at the Taurus demon. The first hit, dealing 0 damage, was concerning, but it was just a glitch as subsequent blows slowly reduced his health. Since the Asylum demon didn't provide an actual debuff, just the contract itself, this fight is completely normal. After his fall, however, I received my first stipulation to the contract. Binds its owner to consume all lesser souls as soon as they are acquired. Souls of special beings are too powerful and avoid such frivolous use. Basically, any poppable souls are now consumed as soon as I pick them up, but not boss souls, which can be shown immediately as there's one nearby. To be honest, this stipulation is pretty irrelevant. I hardly ever use poppable souls when playing anyway, unless I need just a few extra for another level. So I was feeling pretty confident and excited for what the other bosses would show me. I bring strength and dexterity to the minimum requirements to two-hand the Gravelord's sword with just enough left over for 1 point of vitality, then I cross under the dragon and head into the Undead Parish. Here I do all the standard things like grab the basement key for later, say hello to Andre, grab the Firekeeper's soul as well as the greatsword, which is a not so subtle hint to tell me I'm in for a rough and wild ride, then take the elevator back down to Firelink. Since I already have such a powerful weapon, I don't have to worry about leveling it up, so I can just go straight to the gargoyles. The fight is normal, as the only additional stipulation I have doesn't apply to boss fights, so as you would imagine, I topple these beasts without an issue. Since they are a major boss, however, their amendment to the contract is more severe. Binds its owner to hear unseen bells. Bells signal contact with other worlds, but summon reminders of defeat. When thou heareth a bell of awakening, thy fate shall be made known. At first, I didn't really understand this one. The part about the bells was mostly clear. When a bell of awakening is heard, something happens. But what remained a mystery for a while. Timidly, I rang my own bell of awakening, and nothing happened. Upon returning to Firelink, I used the power of the defeated gargoyles to level strength to 24, enough to one-hand my weapon in the event I needed to rely on parry riposte. I then teach Lautrec a physics lesson. Big fall, big hurt. Then I struggle to properly get back to the Asylum, about 4 times before finally making my way to the Crow and pretending to be an egg. In doing so, I am whisked back to the prison where it all began. Originally, I had just come here for the doll, but I figured that the reinforced club does have bleed and I could kill the stray demon right now. So after cutting down the 2 knights and Lemon, I dropped into his arena. The first thing I noticed was this hollow going absolutely insane, hoping to cut an atom and take out the whole mountain. I'm not sure why he was here, but he was, and then he wasn't. It only takes 3 hits or 4 if I'm slow with them to proc bleed. The biggest concern is that I'm pretty sure 1 hit from his explosion would proc death on me. In the end though, I was able to pull it off, awarding me his stipulation. Its owner loses much of their natural bleed resistance, and damage induced by loss of blood is increased. On the surface, I thought this wasn't an issue. The only boss fight that inflicts bleed is Priscilla, and she isn't terribly hard anyway. Yeah, keyword there, boss. Regardless, I use his souls to level vitality to make my escape from the prison once again, thinking I would never return. At this point, I have more than enough power to take down Quelaag. Rather, that is a smart decision given this mod, I'm not sure, but either way, I journey below Firelink and... Don't open the gate, that's now locked. Okay. That's fine, the long way through the Valley of the Drakes is still there, all I have to do is ride this elevator. That is inoperable. Okay, I guess the Master Key is worthless then. So it would seem I am forced to progress normally, which means up next is the Camper Demon, but as I was approaching Havel's Tower to head to the lower Burg, I heard the sound of a bell. It spawned a gargoyle. That's, pretty neat actually. I'm sure this won't become problematic later. I quickly dispatch him with my overpowered sword, run by Havel, and down to lower Undead Burg. So Capra, as you know, isn't really an issue, especially with this weapon, but his dogs are so His dogs. Oh no. Okay, maybe it won't be that bad. Or it is exactly that bad. The worst part is that bleed proc happened in a single hit. That would be a massive problem if the dogs were also able to do it, but I'd rather not find out. I very slowly and carefully clear out the enemies, then throw on some armor because it will hopefully help with my bleed resistance. I decided to be smart and unlock the Firelink shortcut just in case, and since I was so close to 10,000 souls, I figured I would make a stop at Oswald to buy the Bloodbite ring. Yes, I was that afraid of the dogs. As I was running back through, I heard the sound of very heavy footsteps, only to find a bell gargoyle waiting to try and devour my very soul. Unfortunately, he is no match for my sword. I then learned 2 things. 1, that a single hit no longer procs bleed, and 2, that apparently backstabs don't build it up. Then I had this fun little interaction where I tried to backstep to avoid the turnaround backstabs, but I buffered a backstep forward into his dagger. Yeah, it's a great time. How many times must I teach you this lesson, Gargoyle Man? Well, time to face my canine fears. I stayed close to the entrance as to not bait the second dog, and despite missing the first time because my weapon bounced off a wall, I was able to quickly take it out and Capra shortly after. Then I thought I would run over and hit the second one, only to forget this massive abyss freezes me in place. Anyway, what do we have here? Binds its owner to fight additional enemies while in most boss fights. Well, that is most unfortunate sounding. I make the smart decision to level vitality some more, then begin making my way into the depths. I figured I might want a pyromancy teacher, so instead of skipping the whole area, I make sure to free Laurentius. While Gaping Dragon is a pretty easy boss fight, I decided it would be in my best interest to eliminate this Chandler, so I do just that with ease. However, I then Just don't hit the jump button, I guess, and fall through the floor into the lair of the basilisks. This specific area and the Great Hollow are pretty much the only two places in the game I can't navigate freely, as I have probably been to each of them less than 10 times across my hundreds of hours. Regardless, my legs carry me to safely by blindly running in one direction. Yeah, I'm sure that gargoyle won't be in the way at all. Upon entering the boss's arena, I quickly scan to see if it is devoid of any additional enemies, then with a sense of relief, I begin my attack on the head of the beast, only to be assaulted by a soul arrow from the rafters. The mod added a channeler in an inaccessible area. I mean, sure, with a bow I could probably take him out, but that's rough. I didn't have any decent ranged options anyway, so whether I wanted to or not, I just ignored him and baited the gaping dragon's head slam. At some point, I cut off its tail intentionally, because you never know when you might need a strong weapon. At some point the boss was buffed, but since staying far away will consistently bait the head slam, the risk of being hit is very low, and before long he is brought down. Now, what's his stipulation? Owner loses much of their natural poison and toxic resistance, and poison lasts far longer. Oh yeah, just poison is like amplified. Yeah, no, that's fine. It's not like I'm about to go to the fucking poison swamp in the game or anything. Well, to be entirely fair, it actually isn't that big of an issue. Outside of Blighttown, there really isn't a risk of being toxic or poisoned, so despite this being annoying for the immediate future, it will be pointless soon enough. Same with, like, anyone who has beaten the game once. I haven't been to Blighttown from the depths in eons, but it's still a rather uneventful descent. The only thing worth note really is that I killed the parasitic wall hugger and picked up power within. Upon making it to the bottom, I get a tiny bit more vitality and attune my new spell. Of course, I was poisoned running through the swamp. That is unavoidable normally, but especially now. Thankfully though, I had several purple moss clumps to take care of that. Quelaag has two powerful assets that I need to bring my sword down on. There are also two chaos bugs in the arena to be dealt with. The ads die in a single hit, or should I say ad. I only aggroed one of them as the other was by the exit and I never ran close enough to actually make it attack. As far as Quelaag herself, the Gravelord sword absolutely rips through her health bar without an issue, and within just a few swings she is put to rest. I might have a guess what hers does. As a more powerful boss, at least relatively speaking, she has an amendment instead of a stipulation. Hers reads, binds its owner to be a perpetual egg carrier. The infection cannot be cured and feeds on the owner's souls. Basically, I'm permanently gaining half souls from here on out. I ring the Bell of Awakening, then level up some more, and in a moment of clarity, I decided not to fight Ceaseless. Not only would I only get half his reward, but I fear whatever stipulation he has isn't worth the trade-off for one level, though I of course will need to do so eventually. Regardless, I make the long trek out of Blighttown, grabbing this lift key which is used for the nearby door, finally unlocking this shortcut down. I then immediately use it to return and grab the Firekeeper's soul, buy combustion and level my flame to +4, then on all the way back down to Blighttown to grab the Firekeeper's soul there before finally returning and leveling my Estus to +3. While there are still a few bosses around, I decided it would be best to make a push to Anor Londo, so I begin my ascent up Sens Fortress. It is entirely uneventful. Okay, maybe one shocking thing happened. I very carefully don't get one-shot by the Snake Lady and grab the Ring of Steel Protection. By the way, I was wearing the Bloodbite ring when she hit me, so that's cool. I survey the Iron Golem's arena to try and scope out what dangers might await me, but to my delight, I don't see anything. This was a trick, as they just don't spawn until I enter the arena. It's two lightning bolt throwing snake ladies on the pillars surrounding the arena, and still me without a bow. You'd think I'd learn. Individually, they do not do a lot of damage, but I'm not the poise machine that I never am, so it's easy to get comboed, and the Iron Golem hurts a bit more. Couple that with the fact my weapon doesn't do a whole lot of damage to him, my only plan is to basically sprint up and down the arena, dodging the lightning and getting a single hit in. Eventually, I do put him in his wobble animation with his back to the ledge, and with a strong attack, I sent him tumbling down. His amendment reads, at the end of battle, the guardians of the Lordvessel will call upon the latent power of the moon still contained within them. Now, I actually misread this during play as protectors of the Lord's souls, not the Lordvessel, which terrified me as it made me think the 4 Lord souls would have an added phase 2. Still, I pushed on through Anor Londo, grabbing the one Titanite demon here, daring to make a jump from the rafters here, getting shot in the back here, before finally slipping into the castle, totally unnoticed. I pop a boss soul to upgrade my weapon one time and use the remains to buy a single twinkling Titanite as it will be useful shortly. Then I enter Ornstein and Smo's arena, and this is where it gets interesting. The fight begins normally enough, trying to separate them, dying to avoidable things, you know, the usual. When phase 2 begins though, something is off. Occasionally, I would hit Super Smo and Anor Londo would flicker, oscillating between light and dark. At first, I thought nothing of it, just a bug in the mod for an already buggy game. Until Smo was almost dead, and he vanished. Before long, he returned back in his original state, but accompanied by the Shade of the Dragon Slayer, an invincible version of Ornstein. No problem, I literally just did this fight, I can do it again. Slowly, I whittle Smo's health down until he falls. And then phase 3 starts. Super Ornstein, but it's only him, so that's not an issue. And then he revives Super Smo. Thankfully, Smo maintained his low amount of health, so he was only one hit away from death, quickly bringing it back to a 1v1, and after just a few more swings, Super Ornstein also falls. I have to tell you though, this was a wild ride. And a warning that the mod should be taken way more seriously than I'm doing so. A warning that is spelled out in no uncertain terms by the amendment ONS dropped. It reads as follows. When Owner acquires a soul powerful enough to satiate the Lordvessel, the game cycle is incremented one step. Additionally, consumption of Firekeeper souls no longer has any effect. That means, for each of the 4 Lord souls that are required, the game will increase in difficulty to higher New Game Plus cycles. I stood unsure of what to do about this for several minutes. Would it be better to clear everything else except the Lords first to avoid bosses being in New Game Plus, but have to deal with a large amount of stipulations and amendments for them, or take them out now then have to deal with everything else in New Game Plus and beyond? I had some time to think about it, but regardless of my choice, I came here for the Lordvessel, so thank you, Guinevere, I will use it to succeed your father. Then I headed over to everyone's favorite giant blacksmith, bought some more Twinkling Titanite, and murdered him. I did this because the blacksmith's giant hammer is one of the more powerful weapons in the game, and with all that Twinkling Titanite I can eventually upgrade it to max at Andre once I have more souls. Now, about my dilemma. I decided I would tackle every other boss in the game first, then take on the Lords. I didn't know if this was the best way to go about it, but I rationalized that I would simply rather prolong being in base New Game instead of fighting DLC bosses in New Game Plus something with whatever hardships brought by the Lord's amendments. As such, I make my way to the Moonlight Butterfly, who has 2 Stone Guardians in his arena, but they are taken out no problem, and of course when the butterfly lands, he's easily handled. I attempted to escape whatever hellish fate to be inflicted upon me by running up these stairs, but resistance is futile and I was caught by the abyss. Their stipulation reads, finds not its owner, but instead makes their world the home of innumerable vagrants. That's not actually that bad, I think. I mean, sure, vagrants can do damage, but compared to everything else I've received, that's like a walk in the park. I return to Andre and make my hammer a +5, giving me a much needed boost in damage. Surely nothing horrid will ever come of this. At this point, I return to Framp to place the Lordvessel, then I quickly return to the Asylum to grab the ring I totally didn't forget before, as it was now time to go Hydra hunting. I grab the bow on my way down, finally, and clear out some of the enemies. My hammer makes quick work of the golems and the gargoyle that spawn down here, and one whack is enough to take off a Hydra head. The ring wasn't necessary to do this, but why not, you know? After eliminating the golden golem, Dusk is freed and I agree to help her. Again, not that I really had a choice. I head over to Anor Londo and make my way to the Duke's archives. Of course, I'm not here to actually do this part of the game, instead I just wanted the broken pendant. Once obtained, I return to Darkroot and, for better or worse, plunge myself into the DLC. The Sanctuary Guardian put up a good fight, but is easily defeated, dropping the crest of Artorias? Well, that is unexpected, but not entirely unwelcome. Its stipulation reads, binds owner to become mostly hidden from most enemies' view. Owner can pass amongst their foes more easily. That sounds wonderful, actually. I mean, sure, I have a few pathing strats that get modified if enemy AI doesn't aggro properly, but yeah, no, that sounds like a great thing. Maybe they aren't all bad. Oh no. Did I just lock myself out of being able to access any bonfire? I hope at least the ones I already lit still work. Oh no, this is bad. Okay, no, I can still rest at ones I've already lit. At least I can still level up then. Well, enemies sure ignore me. I basically have to be touching them in order for them to notice me. Anyway, I guess I just press forward and take on Artorias, who is flanked by an Ulasil sorcerer. This could go very poorly, but it dies in one hit, so it didn't. As far as the fight itself, there is nothing of note. My damage felt a tiny bit low, but I'm not sure if that's actually the case or not. Maybe the mod was just getting to me. In the end though, Artorias falls on the first attempt. He drops the Covenant of Artorias, which, again, unexpected, but welcome. His stipulation reads, shatters the illusion of the false Sanctuary Guardian and reverses its stipulation. In addition, the Lord of the Abyss that Artorias sought takes far less physical damage but is weakened to the elements. At first, I simply thought this undid what the Sanctuary Guardian stipulation did, but why does it say false? Then I stepped through the fog gate, only to be returned to the garden outskirts, and now I had to face the true Sanctuary Guardian. This is one of the most brutal fights the mod has to offer, and in hindsight, a reason I am so glad I decided to do the DLC before the Lord Souls. The difficulty comes from the fact that there is no programming for the boss to work in a group. They will all just attack whenever they feel like it. On several occasions, I was positioned to hit one of the bosses, but then suddenly blasted by lightning through it by another one. The only upside is that 2 of them die in a single swing of my hammer. Granted, after they begin moving, it's kinda hard to keep track of which ones are the shades and which one's real, but still. This fight took me roughly 30 minutes, which doesn't sound like a lot, and in the grand scheme of things it's really not, but I'm only 3.5-ish hours into recording at this point, meaning it took up 1/7 of my total playtime thus far. But eventually, the true guardian falls and I get the real stipulation. It reads, binds owner to gain less health when consuming humanity or twin humanities, although the latter is more effective. Well, there go my full heals, but in time I would understand. It didn't really matter. But I'm getting ahead of myself. For now, I run back to Artorias' arena to be pleasantly surprised that he is still defeated. I'm thoroughly shocked I don't have to fight him plus Manus in some weird tag team duo fight that's not gonna happen, right? I make my way through Ulasil, nothing much out of the ordinary, but in case you are wondering, there are many vagrants running around everywhere, there just wasn't much of a reason to bring them up. Yet. I put the Mimic to sleep and steal the crest key for later, then take out the gargoyle, and might I just say, I kinda wish this also could spawn Quelaag after her bell? I mean, I say that now, but her massively bloated health bar tells a different story. Anyway, murder the chained prisoner, then enter the abyss. Manus is surrounded by 3 giant humanities, which are more annoying to fight than they are problematic, considering just touching one eats away at my health, but they have no collision detection, so it's really easy to just walk or swing into them. Once they are taken care of, I can focus on Manus, and despite Artorias' stipulation claiming he is stronger to physical but weaker to elements, this fight felt pretty much the same as normal. Maybe the increase and decrease in his defenses were split perfectly, so even if I lost half my hammer's physical damage, I gained it back in elemental, I'm not sure. It was a bit dicey without the silver pendant, but I was able to overcome the darkness on my first try. His amendment reads, binds owner to have reduced health and is invisibly clouded by humanities awakened within them, nullifying soul gain from non-boss enemies. That means from anything that isn't a boss, I don't get souls, and the ones I do get are halved thanks to Quelaag. The text does state that there is a method for dispelling the cloud, but doesn't spell it outright. The bottom part claimed Dusk is tainted, which I thought meant she was the source, so I decided to expedite her death certificate, but this ultimately had no effect. Inside Calamity's arena, I can see that soul pickups still award me some, which is nice, but at this point the totality of the game's poppable souls would probably only be about 6 or 7 levels max, in other words, not very useful. At any rate, I have Goff blast Calamity out of the sky for later, then return to Firelink and head into the catacombs. That line from Manus' amendment saying something about illuminating the abyss makes me think that the silver pendant is involved, so I need a light source to access it, and the most easily accessible one is the skull lantern. At this point, even with the mounting debuffs, I am hilariously overpowered for this section. I grab the Dark Moon Seance ring, then get lucky with this Necromancer dropping the lantern so I don't have to hit the one near the Black Knight. I then embarrassingly get parried by the skeleton, but my defense is so high at this point, he can't even take me out despite having so little health. Returning to Ulasil, I cast Skull Magic at the wall and grab the silver pendant, then I use it in the abyss. Did it work? Perhaps it's a temporary buff, like I have to cast it then kill an enemy, but that also didn't seem to work. Oh well, now I return to Calamity ready to close out the DLC, but then something strange happened. I ran out of stamina, causing me to get the ladder falling animation. And of course, then he wombo comboed me as I tried to recover, but whatever. I mean, I don't think I unintentionally did ladder storage. I couldn't have. The swing prior would have triggered it. Either way, on my second try, I have a pretty standard and clean fight with the dragon. I feel like his Calamity grab range was increased, but it might have just been bad luck. I'm not sure. Also, in case you're wondering how much humanity's healed now, it's not a lot. Anyway, speaking of Calamity, I had a feeling I already knew what Calamity's stipulation was, and after the Abyss Cloud cleared, I see my suspicion was correct. Binds owner to be permanently under the hateful Calamity symbol. There is no nuance here. Death is around every turn. For now, this is actually kind of a concern, but I found some solace in knowing that once I defeat a single Lord Soul, this is nullified as everything would one-shot me at that point anyway. But that will have to wait. There are still a few more optional bosses to handle. First up, I decided to take on Cinder, or the actual boss, the Big Cat. Yeah, the cat is way more terrifying to me than Cinder will ever be. I wondered if the bow cheese was possible, but I figured the mod made Cinder invincible until the fight began, which was correct, but what I really wondered is if I could hit the cat from here. Unfortunately though, I think it's behind the headstone, so I couldn't try. The good news though is that fighting the boss right next to the entrance causes the cat not to notice me. Unfortunately, I perished at the same time Cinder did due to power within, but it happens. Upon leaving, I thought I was hit with a weird glitch. Oh, how I wish that were true. Cinder's amendment reads, binds its owner to the abyss itself. The abyss desires all humanity, and its sludge slows movement and consumes its target upon their death, stealing their souls and humanity. There is one method to escape the clutches of the abyss, but it was made long ago when a brave knight of Gwyn closed up the abyss. So, I'm permanently slowed, and upon death I lose all my souls and humanity without the ability to retrieve them. That last line is interesting though. It claims there is a way to nullify this debuff, but it sounds like I need to beat the 4 kings first. Makes sense, I suppose, because they usually come after Cinder, but I still have several other bosses to deal with first, so I guess I'll just have to deal with this agonizingly slow walk speed. First, I decided to head down towards the demon rooms. I wasn't sure if I'd be able to cheese Ceaseless or not, as I might actually be too slow to get away from him in time and then get obliterated, but it's worth a shot. So, I steal his sister's clothes and begin running for my life. As expected, I get fire blasted from behind, but manage to live it. Very impressive considering the Calamity effect is active, but it's good to know should I have to redo this. Which I thought I would, as there's now a Taurus demon at the entrance. However, as I was preparing to fight it, Ceaseless just told me I didn't have to, so thanks, I think. He didn't despawn with the boss, so I still had to take him out, but that's fine. Anyway, Ceaseless's stipulation reads, binds its owner's equipped armor and weapons to suffer periodic durability loss. Basically, my weapons degrade over time. At first glance, that doesn't sound like anything more than an annoyance, but then I remembered I can't simply farm souls that easily to constantly repair them. But if I pop some boss souls, I'm sure I can buy repair powder. Who sells that again? Oh, that's right. Well, whatever. According to the wiki, they are sold by Elizabeth too, and cheaper. Ah. I really shot myself in the foot in this run, didn't I? I went to Andre to buy the repair box so I didn't have to warp to him every time I wanted to use it, and realized he sold the useless pendant for 100,000 souls. Now, in my head, I'm sure this is a useless trap. But is it? Also, just to make sure, I returned to Ulusil to find Elizabeth had in fact disappeared. Despair and uncertainty weighing heavy in my heart, I had no choice but to push on further into the demon rooms. Fire Sage is not generally an issue. In this encounter, he is flanked by 3 of the fat fire-breathing stone dragons, but they die in a single jumping attack. No, the bigger issue is that I am no longer able to easily outrun the Fire Sage's explosions. Well, that and one other issue. There is a vagrant able to snipe me from outside the arena. The good news is that its vantage point only lets it target the entrance of the arena, so if I fight the Fire Sage near the back, it's fine. I tried about a dozen times, but even getting to the Fire Sage would be an issue due to my slow walking speeds and shit like this happening. Eventually, I made a decision that would change the course of this run. I decided to do the 4 Kings right now. They were always going to be my first target, as doing them on higher new game cycles sounded like a nightmare, but I was so sure they had something to do with dispelling this curse, and I needed my full movement speed back. As such, I made my way to New Londo and began slowly taking out the ghost. Thankfully, my high damage allows me to steamroll the area. I had actually picked up the bow earlier specifically to do the Ingrid cheese for the seal, but I decided against it because at this point I wouldn't be surprised if he had the magic blueberry that lets me become immune to Gwyn's fire attacks or something. So I led the ghosts out and smacked them around before climbing the ladder and grabbing the seal. I then warp out before actually turning the seal because I'm a moron, but oh well, I don't have to go to the ghost house again anyway, so it's whatever. Preemptively, I equipped the Covenant of Artorias and began making my way— what? I can move again? It's just wearing the ring that breaks the curse! Removing it brings the effect back, so I guess I'm just stuck with this ring on my finger forever. I really thought I'd at least have to kill the 4 Kings, but this is fine, I guess. While I was here with weak enemies, I had a thought that the Silver Pendant might remove the No Souls debuff, but only temporarily or only on the next attack or something. It took me a few tries, but I was able to get it to work, but the window to do it seems really tight. Like, I basically had to buffer an attack out of the cast and I had to kill the enemy for it to work, so I'm not really sure. But, at the very least, that means I am still able to farm souls should I need to. Anyway, what was I doing? The 4 Kings? Yeah, not anymore, they can get bent. I returned to the Demon Fire Stage with my newfound mobility and hope, and I thrashed him on the first try. After a couple of practice attempts, I bring the hammer down in a rather unfortunate place, smashing through his health bar. His stipulation reads, binds its owner to be the unwitting host to many sprites who explode outward occasionally and infest nearby enemies. Ensnared enemies gain huge resistance to all but the sprite's affinity, to which they become severely weak. The emission of sprites also has the curious effect of soothing weapons for reasons unknown even to the most learned. This one took me a while to figure out, but its effect isn't shown for some time anyway, so we'll just talk about it later. For now, I figured I would take out my frustration on the vagrant that is above the arena, but my bow does less than amazing damage, so I left it alone. I continue on to the Centipede Demon, and I'd like to take this time to apologize to you, dear viewer, for the retinal damage the lava is about to inflict. The boss itself is an absolute non-issue though, and I blow through his health bar in just a few quick swings. But just as I was feeling good about that, I began to read his stipulation. In a cruel twist, binds bosses the owner battles with health regeneration. The bosses heal over time. Not only is that a problem on its own, but at the very least I will have to fight 4 bosses in New Game Plus and beyond. All the more reason to do the 4 Kings first, I suppose, but anyway, I did not come here to do the Bed of Chaos. That is, at least normally, the easiest of the 4 Lord Souls, so the bug will be squashed last. I just hope the mod didn't place like 47 demons in the arena. Next, I figured I would return to the catacombs and take on Pinwheel. A gargoyle tried to stop me in the pit with the wheelie skeletons, but it was no match for the strategy of ignore and run away. A strategy made famous by any woman I've ever asked on a date, but I digress. Pinwheel has several wheelie bros in his arena that do nearly take me out, but my immense health bar saved me. Once they were dealt with, the boss is no problem, just like always. I did take it a bit slower than normal because I think his projectile attack has been changed to better follow the player, but even with that buff, the boss still falls on the first attempt. His stipulation reads, finds its owner to be unable to use most bonfires unknown to the Lordvessel. Great, so now I can only access bonfires that are warpable with a few exceptions. As I have cleared most of the game anyway, that isn't a huge deal, but I'm glad I didn't try to do Pinwheel early. Fortunately, the first bonfire in the tomb is a warpable one, so I head straight there, light it, and then return to Anor londo to light the Dark Moon Tomb bonfire. I decided I would do Priscilla first, so I headed back upstairs into the Great Hall, only to see the enemies are now very angry with me? They take substantially reduced damage from my attacks, which at first I thought meant it was the Fire Sage's debuff, but that also said that they took periodic damage, but the Painted Guardians never did, making me think it was something else, perhaps related to Gwendolyn's magic. So I decided to ignore it and just head straight into the painting. A gargoyle spawns, but I just kept running. The idea of Gwendolyn's magic suddenly fell apart because the enemies in the painted world are also affected by this angry aura, so I'm not entirely sure what it is. Either way, I sprint through the area, which is much more menacing now, drop down from this ledge, open the door, then for once went into the bone zone below the plaza. I only did this so I could grab Fire Surge, but also to remember where the mechanism for the door was and the Annex key for an unrelated reason. I do pick up the Dark Ember just because I'm here, and by the time I arrive at Priscilla, the angry aura had dissipated, and in its place are two crow demons. They gave me some issues, but with some clever running around and a lot of 1 HP and a dream of luck, I can take out the two birds and return this to being an entirely unfair 1v1. The boss health regeneration seems to be pretty quick, but not a substantial amount. That's good because I was really worried about it for some of the harder fights. And eventually she goes down, and I am awarded her stipulation. When owner uses a unique weapon, dragon weapon, or a weapon born from a powerful soul, connecting attacks have a chance to enrage the weapon, dealing damage to the wielder. I now hurt myself for my weapon choice. Perfect. In an act of desperation to end this run before it gets worse, I throw myself off a cliff but only respawn in Anor londo with a now very angry gargoyle charging at me. Gwendolyn is up, and thankfully I already grabbed the Dark Moon Seance ring so I can just open the way without hurting Guinevere. At this point I was kinda worried if I did kill her, the game would give me a debuff like, die every 3 seconds. There is nothing special or difficult about this fight, though the health regeneration does mean I have to chase him down more frequently than normal. Upon defeat, the final stipulation is dropped. When owner casts a projectile spell of any school, they are unable to cast any magic for a period of time and rapidly lose stamina. Enchantment of oneself or one's weapons require less commitment or focus in producing a physical object, and no temporary sickness results. Initially, I thought this wouldn't be an issue. I wasn't built for something like Dark Bead, so it didn't really matter. At this point, I decided to do a little extra cleanup, in that I murdered the fair lady, but not before resting, so now I had to run all the way out of Blighttown as none of the bonfires worked, then I handled the Dark Moon Nidus. I tried in desperation to cure my egghead, but to no avail, then I leveled up my Estus to +5. Next, I returned to Sens Fortress and grabbed the Flame Stoneplate ring, as well as the Slumbering Dragon Crest ring. Then it was off to the Asylum to trade the Skull Lantern for the Fog ring. The reason I was doing my item collection now is due to the fact that each Lord Soul will push the game into higher New Game Plus cycles. I don't think that would cause bosses like Pinwheel or the Demon Runes ones to respawn, but just in case, and besides, in base New Game, I can survive a couple of hits. Anyway, I head through the Duke's archives and attempt to use my Ring of Sacrifice on my mandatory Seath death, which was stupid because thanks to the Abyss swallowing me, I don't get to keep my humanity or souls anyway. I then escape from the prison in a daring fashion, only to grab a key and return moments later. Unfortunately, I forgot the safe word, so the ladies were a bit rougher than I would have liked. Eventually though, I got what I came for, the final Firekeeper's soul. At this point I had done all the prep work necessary, or so I thought, so I headed into New Londo and the residents were angry with me again. Since I forgot to drain the water before, I have to do it now, which is easy enough, and I can actually use the ladder shortcut I kicked down for the first time in probably ever. Then it's just a quick run over to the lever and that's it. Alright, time for the Four Kings. I wasn't too worried except for the health regeneration. This weapon should be able to clear the kings individually before the next one spawns with just decent RNG. Okay, well, maybe small problem. At this point the gears were turning that maybe this was the Demon Fire Sage's stipulation, and I assumed that is fire, so I equipped Fireball to test out on the local hollows. However, by the time I had done this, it had already worn off, so all I got to see was my stamina plummet. But then I had a great idea. Maybe I can cheese the Four Kings with Fire Surge. I mean, it's not a projectile, it's more like a flamethrower. Yeah, that didn't work. I didn't realize it, but the mod was subtly, or maybe not so subtly, steering me in the only way to win is to get good path, but like the toxic version of it, not the uplifting version. Anyway, on my third attempt at the kings, I was able to overcome them, pushing the world into New Game Plus and this run further into hell. Binds owner to have perpetual life drain, the accursed art that seduced the Four Kings. There is no escaping life drain, for it eats away at the soul itself. I am now constantly taking damage. So this is where the mod kind of ramped up in difficulty considerably. Everything prior to this fight had just been minor annoyances at most, save for Ringless Sith, but everything after this fight, the amendments to the contract are brutal. But, on the other hand, only 4 more bosses to go until I was freed from this torment. My plan was always 4 Kings first and Bed of Chaos last, but I wasn't sure where to put Nito and Seath. I feel like Seath is easier mechanically speaking, as Nito has built-in bone buddies, and the mod probably adds even more, so doing him first made the most amount of sense to me. As such, it's off to the Tomb of the Giants, and a gargoyle is summoned on this very narrow walkway. Yeah, that's probably the worst place this could have ever been put. Since the game world is a New Game Plus, I am no longer able to 3-shot these things, but thankfully 2 hits are still enough to make it stagger. But this is still one of the most aggravating things the mod has done. Basically, every time I want to try and fight Nito, I have to get by this thing, and sometimes it just likes to sit there constantly breathing fire. Unfortunately, my bow is still worthless, and I don't have the souls necessary to bring it up to a serviceable level. Eventually, I get through and was smart enough to return to human form, so I get to fight Leroy. I did this for the Sanctus to hopefully offset the life drain. It isn't 1-to-1, unfortunately, but it's good enough. Also, I decided to do the Ring of Fog cheese for Nito, which means I am slowed by Sif's stipulation, but it's better than dealing with the Bone Squad. And, as expected, Capra's stipulation put one of the terrifying Dogbone enemies into the arena. However, I learned 2 very useful pieces of information. First and most importantly, the dog thing doesn't respawn, probably because the mod developer couldn't figure it out, and not out of the kindness of his heart. No, Jane, I want him to make another version of this, but like 10 times harder. Second is that this weapon, or class of weapons maybe, are able to do the block trick for Nito's surprise sword enema attack. But, at some point, the enemies were once again afflicted by the Angie. So let's finally talk about this thing. It is, in fact, the Demon Fire Sage's stipulation. The reason I didn't think it was is because, 1, for the majority of the run, I only saw the Fire Aura, despite it being possible to have magic and occult and presumably others. At the time of writing this, I'm not actually done with the run, but I have seen Fire 9 times, magic twice, and what I assume is occult once. The second reason is because the text says it's an aura on the player, but I don't see anything surrounding me, it's just on the enemies. To be fair, maybe my other buffs are overriding visual effects, I'm not sure. Then, the third thing is that this claims enemies afflicted will take periodic damage, but that never happened. However, I think that's just a quirk of the game engine. Maybe. It kinda seems like this effect is achieved by utilizing bleed procs, but as I'm in the tomb, it's mostly skeletons, which can't be bled. I'm not really sure, but that's how it felt later. It's just kind of a guess. Regardless, I left and upgraded my Reinforced Club to +5 and death ran to the catacombs. This took more attempts than I care to admit, but eventually I made it down to Vamos and was able to make a Fire Reinforced Club. It wasn't maxed out, but I could go to the Crestfallen Merchant and buy some green Titanite and bring it to +5 myself. However, by this time the Fire Aura had vanished, so it didn't really matter at present. So I got back to throwing myself at Nito over and over and over again. That dog monster is so annoying to kill when you're slowed and everything it does just one-shots you. Eventually, enough time had passed where the aura flared up again, and this is where, in Run, I realized what it was, because it randomly hit Patches. And I got to see him pulse for damage until he died. Sorry Patches, I guess. I then stupidly went back to Firelink. My plan was to test the damage of the Fire Club on the hollows to see how big the increase was, but upon loading in, it immediately radiated and hit the Crestfallen Warrior and Laurentius. The former I don't really care about, but now I can no longer access my Pyromancy teacher. Admittedly, at this point, the vast majority of Pyromancies aren't particularly helpful, but still, taking out an option is never a good thing. I didn't actually kill Laurentius in case I could somehow cleanse my sins from Oswald, but that would probably cost more than the pendant at this point. So I went back to Nito, and at one point I had the great idea to try and use the bow on him, but then I remembered he would regenerate well faster than I could damage him, even if it was upgraded. I tried alluring skulls just to get the dog to turn around. Didn't work. So the problem was either that the slow walking speed would just straight out get me killed, or Nito would constantly stab his sword into the ground while I was otherwise needing to attack or avoid this thing. After roughly 2 hours of trying, I finally got an attempt where I killed the dog, and Nito got stuck behind his entourage, because of course he did. I inched my way closer, and Nito eventually did a different attack, killing his own support, and after he finally stopped screaming like the undead baby he is, he waddled over to me. The biggest concern now was being able to get far enough away from him before he exploded. The good news is that while my walking speed is drastically reduced, I am able to light roll at full speed, so as long as I have stamina I can kind of just spam dodge away. Second problem is the health recovery, specifically with the fact I have to keep running away. This really drags out the encounter, and I even switched to Power Within at some point just to try and push out higher damage numbers. It wasn't much, but every little bit helps, especially when he hit himself like the idiot that he is. This was the slowest Nito fight I have ever done, but eventually I stood victorious, and the game gets harder to compensate. Nito's amendment reads, binds its owner's world to be filled with disasters, the result of a Gravelord's servant practicing their terrible art. Basically, my world is now overrun with red phantoms, which is actually pretty cool. I never play online, so I never see these enemies, and while they do pose a threat of being in my way when I'm trying to get somewhere, they aren't actually affecting the bosses in any way. At this point I head back to Sens Fortress, jump the gap that has the red phantom snake lady, and bought a bunch of green titanite. My goal was to try and get some of the elemental weapons maxed out to use for the Sprite's Affliction. They were harder to get to than I thought, so I'll come back to that idea. Red phantom versions of the blue golems are actually really cool to look at. Anyway, on my way to the boss, a gargoyle spawned on the invisible walkway, which sucks, but there is enough room to squeeze by, so it's okay. Seath is flanked by 2 tentacle ladies, but in a cruel twist of fate, his girthy tentacle proves too much for them. And for that joke, I died. And got cursed. Not that more health mattered at this point. Damage was looking pretty bad, and it's only going to get worse, so I ran and got the red tearstone ring. I wasn't sure if I would deliberately activate it, but it is good to have as a backup plan. Seath still took a few tries, not because he is overly difficult, but because this is the Prepare to Die edition, so I also had to battle the frame rate. But, unlike Nito, there was no annoying runback, and before long, the Scaleless becomes the Smashed Mini. Because I hit him with my hammer a lot. Did you get the joke? Is it a good joke? I'm sure you can guess what his amendment does, but binds its owner into an unbreakable curse. Permanent half health. At first, this sounded awful, but at this point I take double damage and am in what? New game plus 3? Yeah, everything was going to one-shot me anyway, so who cares? At Andre, I buy the weapon and armor smith boxes as well as level my fire reinforced club to plus 5. I then decide, against my better judgment, to pop a bunch of souls and buy the pendant. What does it do? Nothing! Okay, well, I don't actually know if it does nothing. There might be a place to use it somewhere that does something, but I haven't found it yet. Well, no matter, I head back down to the Demon Ruins and make the very long trek from the Daughters of Chaos bonfire all the way to the Bed of Chaos. When I finally arrive, I see that there are 2 of the Centipede Demons arm bug things in the arena, but they are both easy to kill and to avoid, so they tried their best. The first ball is easy enough to pop, then after a simple quit out, I slide down the platform, realize the bugs are alive again, but the boss is the same, and for some reason, instead of just running, I take them on, and now I have to run all the way back there. At this point, I was kind of tired of not being able to rest at Firelink when I warped there, so goodbye Laurentius. In case you were wondering, the mod author was not kind enough to let this bonfire be one of the exceptions. The second time I entered the arena, I did just run, but unfortunately after making the jump, I mistimed the dodge and got pummeled into oblivion. Third try, I was successful in crushing the left nut, then I quit out again and I was poised to end the fight. But the Bed of Chaos had other plans for me. At this point, I asked JK if he remembered if the Eyeless shortcut opens from this side without the humanity, and he told me that it did. Then again, he is the one that pitched this mod to me, so he could be lying just to prolong my suffering. Well, joke's on him, I do that to myself. When I finally got there, I saw the enemies are afflicted by the magic aura, which, I mean, the Bed of Chaos doesn't really have any health anyway, so that doesn't matter. And JK was, in fact, not lying and the shortcut did open. Also, Gargoyle. I go ahead and warp to the Duke's Archives to grab the Enchanted Falchion, probably not the best weapon for my stat distribution. Actually, no, 100% not a great weapon for my stats, but even unupgraded it does vastly more damage than my maxed out hammer. I still died a couple of times to the bed, and at least once to that Titanite demon, but there was no skill involved at this point, I just had to get a tiny bit lucky, and eventually it happened. The bug is squashed. The final amendment reads, binds owner to hear whispers of long past incantations. Although the speakers have been dead for ages, such spells eventually prove why the Witch of Izalith was so formidable. Whispers can be silenced by wearing the old witch's ring. At first, I thought it was just some droning noises. No, it actually means I explode and deal continuous fire damage to myself on top of the already life-draining ability. I do find it strange that the mod outright says the old witch's ring stops it, but for something like Sif's, it just gives a cryptic riddle? Oh well, whatever, I'll take it. And finally, it was time to offer the Lord Souls up and descend into the Kiln of the First Flame. Okay, so I've rewritten this part like 9 times because I kept trying Gwyn, saying I would give up, then going, no, one more try and would learn something new. So please, bear with me, this is going to be a weird conglomerate of everything that happened over like the 8 hours of Gwyn attempts. For reference, the whole run took like 15, so Gwyn was literally the majority of this playthrough. First off, the run up to him is absolutely littered with red phantoms, and they will aggro you with the regular knights, 2 at a time. Not how I expected to go, but hey, there is also a gargoyle. None of these things really pose an issue as you can just sprint by them, except the Vagrant that will snipe you. I learned you have to just wait by the pillar for its shot to collide, then keep running. It can also jump forward. If it does that, you can just keep running, it doesn't really matter. Okay, time to talk about Gwyn, Lord of Ruining My Day. When you enter his arena, you will see that he is flanked by 2 Black Knights, because fuck you, that's why. Honestly, at first, I gave him one try before just setting the controller down and saying, nah, I'm good, I want to do something else that doesn't make me feel like a prolapsed anus. But like I said, I had to keep trying, and so I did. Over and over and over, and I was about to break my desk. It's like a minute and a half run back-ish, then I get into the arena, run forward, parry the first knight, then get my ass blasted by a big flaming sword within seconds, which of course is an instant kill. It was beyond goddamn frustrating. I was not having a good time. So, why did I keep trying then? Well, first off, one attempt didn't really feel worth it after getting here, but I rationalized that if I could kill the 2 knights, I could probably beat Gwyn. Except on the rare chance I actually did get a hit on him, I did practically nothing for damage. Which got me thinking that I would need to utilize the Fire Sage's aura, like that had to be why it was even in the game, right? So, full disclosure, I hacked in 99 of all the Titanite. Wait, uncaps lock your keyboard and put down your get goods. It was mostly just a test, and in the end I actually only ended up using the regular Titanite chunks. And while I do admit I did hack those in too, I also farmed enough trying to get the Black Knight sword, which had a weirdly low drop rate for some reason. I got like 4 shields and 2 great swords and never saw the regular one, but I digress. Point is, at the end of my ranting, everything I did was done legitimately. Well, kinda, you'll see. I didn't use any of my hacked things. Anyway, about those tests, I tried, I really did, but it didn't seem like I actually did an increased amount of damage. I mean, it was an increase, but generally not enough to make it worth it. I don't know if having like 99 int or faith paired with the aura would have made a monumental difference, but at my lower stats, it did practically nothing. So after many attempts, I came up with there being basically 4 ways to win this encounter. 1, just become god tier good and never get hit. 2, insanely high damage riposte, like 99 int crystal magic weapon and one-shot the knights to immediately take them out of the fight. 3, have a weapon that can stagger Gwyn, and the blacksmith's giant hammer actually can in 2 hits. The problem is that it will occasionally drain my life, but like the reinforced club can do it too, so that one's fine. And 4, utilize the Fire Sage's mechanic, probably in tandem with any of the other 3. But I couldn't really easily go farm levels. I mean, there is a way to do it, like luring the Red Phantom Baronic Knight in Undead Parish off the ledge repeatedly, but I didn't want to do that for hundreds of levels. So I kinda just wanted to give up, just say, hey, he won, I can't do it. And this is where JK showed up again to potentially save the day. As it turns out, quitting out of Gwyn's arena will cause the knights to not aggro and you can 1v1 the big man himself. Is this cheese? Yes it is. Do I care? Hell no! Sure, it's kind of sorta against the spirit of the mod, but let me reiterate some of the things happening. I have permanent half health, double damage, life drain, 2 ring slots taken up by staving off negative effects on their own, my weapon causes me to self-damage, the game is a new game plus 2 goddamn many, Gwyn regenerates health? It's acceptable. Then I ran a couple of tries just fighting Gwyn, and as you'd expect, the SS parry loop works like normal, but it was going to take me like 20-ish parries to do it. Now, I can do that. I can do 20 parries no problem, but Gwyn will sometimes just slash me into oblivion, and there's literally nothing I can do about that. Option 1 is to just be patient and hope for good RNG. Option 2 is to get more damage to reduce the amount of parries needed, and thus the amount of chances he can retaliate with the fast slash. Originally, I had planned to use the Black Knight Halberd, but I didn't have the levels for it, so I decided to do the Black Knight Sword instead, which I also didn't have the levels for, but that's why I was farming for it. Then, I realized I had the perfect stats for the Zweihander, so I leveled it up, went and grabbed the Hornet's Ring, which, surprise, Red Phantoms are here, so I had to go around by the big cats, and when I finally landed the parry, it was like double damage. Now, because I was using the Hornet Ring, one of the 2 rings I had on obviously had to come off, which is stupid. I have 10 fingers, and if we hang a poster of Priscilla or Quelaag in the room, I could have a At first, I tried to have Sif's debuff on, but I'm weirdly bad at slow walking or standing still and parrying the leap attack. Like, while moving forward at normal speed, I almost always hit it, but standing still or lore walking? Nah, it's like a 0% chance. So the better option was to take off the old Witch's Ring, especially because I had to use an Estus anyway, so the damage doesn't really matter. And after a few more attempts, the stars aligned and Gwyn can suck the fattest part of my ass. After that, I did go ahead and kill the knights in the arena, so I totally did this the way the mod intended. I mean, they're all dead, right? So that's what counts. Yep, 100%. Gwyn's death awards a clump of ash, and upon use, you win! The contract is null and void, and I am released from this prison. Hey everybody, thanks for watching this week's video. Oh, this mod. Oh man, it was something else. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it more right up to like Gwyn, and then it kind of fell off a little bit because I don't know. I mean, the 2 nights that was a bit much. Like 1 night I could get that, but 2 nights it's a bit much. I don't know. It didn't help that the mod, it definitely was pigeonholing me into using a melee. I mean, obviously, because like if I did anything magical, I'd have just been screwed, which is fine, I guess. But I don't really know. But I did enjoy it for the most part. I don't know if I could recommend it. It's hard as hell at times, but it is what it is. So if you got prepared to die, you consider trying it if you liked what you saw. And also, this week's champion, Revirus, congratulations.